Hi and welcome to Goecker Live, and thank you for watching. My name is Morten Hansen, I'm from Goecker and I'm going to be your host tonight. And by the way, we do this live event in English, and that is mainly because of our growing Swedish audience, so that's the way we're going to do it tonight. And why this event? Yeah, just a few hours ago Sony introduced a brand new video camera, the FX6 camera, which fits into their new cinema lineup, which also include the Venice camera and the FX9 that you already might know. And to introduce this new FX6 camera, we have invited Daniel from
Thank
Sony.
you very much. Thank you.
Welcome. And you out there, don't forget to remember that our chat is open and you can post your questions anytime you want. And we will try to answer your questions during the event here. Once again, welcome, Daniel, and please tell us about the new camera.
Excellent.
Maybe a few words about yourself.
Well, I mean, I work for Sony, obviously. I've been working for Sony for a couple of years, 7 years now. So I was included in some of the other launches of other popular cameras like the FS7, FS5, and I'm very happy to see that we now have a new camera that we can announce. And based on many of the feedback that I've had with dialogues of people using these cameras before. The FS5 is a very popular camera, so has the FS7 also been, and lots of people have been giving us feedback, and we've been able to send that feedback all the way to Japan, and they've been studying how can they implement this in new cameras. So that's why I'm very excited to show what this camera can do. Great. Because it's they have been listening, it's clear, and it's very exciting. Unfortunately, I don't have a camera here. It's very early. It's the same day as the camera has been announced, and hopefully we will be able to be here in the shop and actually have a physical camera in the very near future. So I'm looking forward to that. Sure. But I do have a presentation. There's going to be lots of images. We have some videos as well. So we have lots to go through. So without further ado, maybe we should just dive right into the presentation. Just quickly, I'll just note that, as Morten said, we have this chat function, and I'm here to answer the questions. So there's no silly questions, there's no stupid questions. Just feel free to ask any questions, and I'll try and do my best to answer them with the knowledge that I have. So I'll go to the presentation. So first of all, I do have a video of this small teasing. Excellent. So if we dive into what we actually try to achieve with our cameras, first of all, I mean, we just saw some of the video here. We want to make a tool that's elegant to use for any photographers and users out there. So they have the best tools available to create brilliant images. And having a tool that fits your benefit as the technology grows means that it puts a lot of pressure on us to make sure that the cameras evolve just as quick as the technology does. So it's very difficult to get the feedback and also then send it and try to make perfect cameras. So that's makes sense. It's the feedback that is important because the technology is going so fast. If we dive a little bit into our history, 20 years ago, we came with the F900 camera, and that was the first Cine Alta camera. So this means that it's a digital camera that out of the box is made to record 24 frames per second. This means that it was elegant to be used inside a film production, but achieving digital images instead of analog. So this was kind of the first mover in the Sony world to do this. And that's what, 20 years ago? That's 20 years ago. 20 years ago. And now we're here today with, I mean, obviously the Venice camera is getting a lot of attention. We're seeing some of the content being being used to generate beautiful images on various platforms that are video on demand, and also in the big screen when, well, I mean, we have Corona right now, but when the cinemas are open for everybody to join, we see even big films on the cinema screen that are actually able to be produced by a Sony camera as well. So I do remember, if I remember correctly, the F900 was used to record the Star Wars Episode 1. And that was the first time they went into a digital camera for that kind of production. So it's some interesting productions that our cameras are being used for. So technology, passion, we try to make these things go together in harmony. Again, by speaking with people who are using these cameras and living by actually producing video content, it is not only their job, it is their passion to actually make something beautiful and perfect. And I mean, every single detail, they use so much time on making sure that, you know, the light and the shadow and the settings are perfect. So it's how that we can get the harmony of that passion to fit into how the technology is designed. And it's not easy, but it's based on the feedback. We therefore made CinemaLine. We announced this year, which is a group of cameras. By using these cameras, you would then see similar experience in the way you use the camera and the workflow around the camera. So, and of course also the look, but in more or less the menu structure should be similar. The naming of the different functionalities are similar. The expectancy in look and video quality and workflow should also go in harmony. Obviously, there's going to be some difference in technology that's inside the camera, so there are going to be some differences between the cameras that are within the CinemaLine itself, but it gives the user a similar experience of using these cameras. So it's quite easy to go from one camera to another, from project to project, which is what people want. They want this thin red line of fluidness when going from one camera to another. There are benefits of using the different cameras. So we announced previously this year the Venice camera, obviously being inside this CinemaLine products. The FX9 has been very well received, and we of course are missing a camera in order to have a trio of cameras, and that's why we're talking here today with the FX6. So the Venice itself has been used for high-end productions, movie productions. I'm looking forward to going to the cinema and seeing the new Top Gun film that's been shot on this camera. Hopefully next month, if all fingers crossed, and I can go to the cinema. The FX9 has been used for so many different productions. I mean, so many people have been using this camera and been using it for live broadcast news when they need to cover the election in America, but also for documentaries and even for more artistic, like music videos and short films and even drama productions in the low cost category. People have been using this same camera. And workflow-wise, they can go very well together. So it's great harmony with these cameras. Great. So in terms of getting something that's lightweight, handheld, even gimbal-friendly, we are missing that camera. Obviously, we have the FS5, but that's 5 years ago, and it does not keep up with the technology that's available. So, of course, we want to announce the FX6 camera. So the FX6 camera has many of the same design when you want to use the camera as the FS5. So the FX6 is taking what we've learned to be beneficial for that camera, and then we've added some nice little details that makes this a wonderful camera. So we have this trio now of cameras. There is a little bit of a look that defines them, and with the new camera we also have a little CinemaLine stamp on the actual camera. But it is great to have now this consistency between the usage of the cameras and workflows. So here's a little bit of a close-up of the camera. Obviously, this is a little bit different from where we're used to. It's got an alpha stamp on the front of the camera, and I'll explain a little bit of why that is. We have a challenge, of course. We want to make sure that our different routes or different technologies can merge better together. We have some brilliant lenses out there from our E-mount world. These are being used for so many different cameras, but especially stills cameras. The alpha cameras has been increasing dramatically in their usage and capability of what these cameras can do. This year, the Alpha 7S Mark III, which people have been waiting for a long time, it's finally gotten here, and it's amazed a lot of people what this camera can do. And this is where we have a stills camera that is looking, well, I mean, can be used for professional video, but it is the body of a stills camera. And that's both a good thing in some environments. You know, it's lightweight, you can put it into a backpack, you can run around with it and be inconspicuous. So you're actually possible to be much more, well, I don't want to call it secret, but you can get away with things with a still cameras, but you're shooting video compared to if you have a shoulder-based camera. Yeah. So how can we merge these things into that?
Yeah, and I think there's a question here.
There's a question already.
Yeah, it's about the design of the camera.
Yes.
And it's regarding the microphone. How many tracks can you actually mount on the camera?
Yeah,
how many microphones?
I can hear that people are enthusiastic to know all of the things that are in the details of the camera. So, I mean, it is in a part of my slide as well. I'll try to continue and go through it faster. To answer the question, there is possible of recording 4 audio tracks on this camera, built-in. 4 audio tracks inside the camera. So compared to the FS5, this is a major upgrade. A lot of people were saying the FS5 is a great camera, but it's a pity that it only has 2 audio tracks. And the new one, the FX6, has 4 tracks.
Great.
So let me just go through this very quickly regarding our fundamentals, because we do have, very uniquely, we do make a lot of different products. I mean, Sony is a big company, and we have the benefit of making lots of different things. I mean, we have a table full of different things that Sony creates, and they go in harmony with each other and benefit each other when used together. So obviously we make sensors, we make lenses, and we want to make sure that all of this works together in harmony. So you have the benefit of, by using great lenses, you can get some excellent look out of them. And the same with our image quality. We strive to make better and better image quality. This camera is going up to a full frame sensor. The whole market is going that way. So we see that having a video camera that can also do full frame is just going to benefit that capability of doing high quality image. Speed, high speed especially, but being fast and reactive. So it's not only high speed that is the focus here, it's the way that the camera can work really fast. And I'll go into that. The battery life, yes, we all hate when the camera is running out of battery. We don't want that happening here today. So we need to make sure that the battery life is large, but also that the cameras are efficient, that they aren't so power hungry. And we can do that with using new technology that does not require as much power. And of course, we need to be small and lightweight. That's obviously. But I must say that we are very beneficial when we have so many different Sony factories that can benefit the different segments that come to Hull and build a camera. So we have our own lenses and sensors, and every single component that's made inside the Sony camera is made by Sony factories. So we can suddenly be very reactive when we want to make something new, and we can make it ourselves. So we're not that dependent on other factories to do things for us. This has been a great benefit in the Corona status, where we could have control of our own process or production.
Absolutely.
We got 58 lenses on the market, all of them E-mounts, and we actually want to, I mean, we can use them for full frame. There are full frame lenses, but there are also APS-C lenses, so Super 35, it's got different names for it, and they of course have the same protocol. So obviously we can use these lenses on a stills camera and it would work perfectly, but we can also use them on a video camera and they would work perfectly as well. So there is a harmony between the mount and the protocol, and that's a benefit from us. Alpha camera. So this is it is produced by the Sony Alpha team. So the development is being done in Japan by the division that normally takes care of the stills cameras, and we'll see why that is when we look into what this camera can do. And it's also got a different product name. Normally we have these PXW, the professional XAVC workflow, which it stands for. And now we've got this ILME, which is much more typical in the stills lineup and the alpha way of naming cameras. And it's always very strange how we make our names, but the small the small things actually mean something. But I mean, everybody's going to know and learn that this camera is called the FX6, so I don't think it matters that much. This sensor has amazing sensitivity. I've been testing it out, and I have a video that I can show later about the sensitivity and the automation of that sensitivity. It's doing great work, and again, benefiting from the full frame sensor makes this a given that by having a big sensor, you can get a lot of light into that sensor, and then you'll have a brilliant signal to noise ratio.
And it's a brand new sensor, or is it?
It is a brand new sensor. Yeah, I mean, we are inspired definitely by what's working in other cameras, but this is a new sensor that's been developed for this camera. But it's very similar to some of the other sensors, how they are made. So it's a back illuminated sensor. So this means that by using the back illumination technology, we have a very fast readout speed, and we can have the benefit of a signal to noise ratio as well. Of course, cinematic expression is what you can get out of a full frame as well. So full frame sensor means full frame lenses, and that will again benefit you in what kind of look you're looking for. The design, as I mentioned before, is very similar to what the FS5 could do. So this camera was great to being able to pick it up and use it for run and gun environment. And that's what this camera can do as well. We're keeping the handle and the grip, so it is very fundamental that you can move around and being very flexible if you want to do the low mode or high mode or put it into a gimbal. That is very effective with this camera as well. So you were asking about the sensor. So it is a 10.2 megapixel camera. So this means there's a perfect for full frame, and we're not using any oversampling in this case. But again, it's a back illuminated structure, so it's going to be fast in its way of working, and it's going to give you high sensitivity. And you'll notice that the autofocus has got over 600 autofocus points, so we'll be able to do brilliant autofocus with this camera as well, which is something we saw for the first time on the FX9. That here we had a professional video camera that could do autofocus, something that we've borrowed from the Alpha team with the Alpha 7s, being able to do brilliant autofocus, putting that into a video camera, then suddenly these lenses come to life and are being used for some perfect productions where people see that they can suddenly trust the autofocus. Right. The new CPUs is the latest on the market. This means that the camera will be able to do a lot of things at the same time. So this means that we will be able to see some efficient codecs, a better battery life, and again, doing autofocus while doing other things is not going to limit the camera itself. And that's because we got the newest computers that are available and put that into the camera. So it's a very high-end camera and can do a lot of things that the previous cameras could not do. And that's because we got the newest computers in them. So the newest hardware, you're able to do some of the craziest things. Yeah. Let's see. So the ISO, the sensitivity of the camera, we got two different sensitivities because we got the high mode and the low mode. So when you're outdoors in daylight, you do not want to have a lot of ISOs because you got already a lot of light in the daylight environment. So 800 ISO, this is if the camera is set to S-Log. We have 800 ISO, but then with a click of a button, you can boost the sensitivity and take advantage of a low light application. So now we're in Denmark, so it's past 6 o'clock and it's in the winter time, so it's already very dark. So having suddenly 12,800 ISO is going to benefit you dramatically. If you go into a cafe, if you're allowed to, if you go into a cafe and want to keep the environment of the light that's available to you, having 12,800 ISO is going to be very great to keep that and being more inconspicuous and not rushing over with these big lamps and destroying some of the mood that will be there. So it's brilliant for that low light sensitivity. And that's because we have a full frame sensor and the pixels are very large because we don't have a lot of them. We only got these 12.4 megapixels. It's almost half the megapixels compared to the FX9. So the larger the pixels, well, the more light can hit the pixels, and that means it becomes more sensitive. Yeah.
Makes sense.
We make dynamic range tests every time we make a new camera, and this one also fits the 15 stops dynamic range. And that again is a benefit when you take the FX9 and the Venice camera, which also had 15 stops of dynamic range. So you'll be able to match the cameras side by side in post really, really elegantly. And I think that's a benefit for the users as well. Cinetone. So S-Cinetone was developed first of all for the Venice camera, where you could get brilliant images out of the box. We were focusing on the highlight roll-off. Previously, people needed to be very careful with the highlight on Sony cameras. So with this new look, there was a much prettier roll-off, especially on skin tones. The details of the skin tones were better, and also the contrast of colors. We turned down the contrast a little bit, so it wasn't so broadcasty. So we changed the look to be prettier out of the box. It might not be as correct as some engineers would like, but it's out of the box. It makes a lot of people happy because it looks good out of the box. And we could see that people investing in the FX9, they were very happy with the look out of the box. They had customers who were happy with this look, and we put that as a profile into the FX6 as well. So we can have the same look out of the box from
the two cameras.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's going to be very easy to get a decent look out of the box and mix them up without spending too much time in post to actually get them to match. One thing that was also noted regarding the FS5 was the limitations of the codecs. So the codec itself was not that great for 4K productions. So we had XAVC long-op, but we did not have XAVC intra. And XAVC intra is the codec that you really want if you want to have a big postal flexibility in 4K. This means that you want to be able to do 4:2 chroma samplings for the highest color resolution, and also you want to have the maximum amount of colors. And by going to 10-bit in 4K, this means you have 1 billion colors instead of 16 million colors, which was what the FS5 could do in 4K. Yeah. So for any grading in post in 4K, this camera will be able to match the other cameras like the FX9 really elegantly, because they both share the XAVC intra codec, something that many people missed on the FS5, and I'm happy to see that we put it in the FX6 as well. Yeah. Another thing was the Cine EI workflow. The Cine EI workflow made it possible to get the highest quality inside the cameras. So we set the camera to shooting S-Log3, and then we set the color space to be the maximum color space, which is S-Gamut 3. This means that you're recording the highest dynamic range and you're recording the highest color space. And this is set to be locked, so you can't really change that much. You need to expose correctly and frame, and then you do everything else in post. And that was a really easy workflow for a lot of people, because they could concentrate on what's important when they're shooting, and they could concentrate on everything else in post. Yeah. And that the FS5 could not do, which was a shame for a lot of users. The FS7 could do it, the FX9 can do it, and the Venice can do it. And now also the FX6. So again, aligning the workflow is something people really like to see. So, and again, something that benefits the users. I mentioned the autofocus, so it's got really high autofocus. It's got a whole menu just to define how the autofocus is going to work. So this means that you can go into the menu and you can say, well, do you want fast autofocus, or do you want it to be a little bit slow? Do you want it to have the fast speed of a robotics, or do you want it to have a little bit more of a slowness like a human touch? This is something you can set up in the menu. Should it prioritize faces, or should it prioritize subjects? Everything is something you can set into the menu of the focus. It's very flexible, so autofocus does not just mean is it on or off. You need to define how it should work with you.
Okay, yeah, good.
There's a question from Ronnie.
What are the differences between the FX9 and the FX6? It sounds like that the FX6 is just a little smaller than the FX9.
So the difference between the FX9 and the FX6, well, there is some different hardware. So of course, the FX9 came last year and did revolutionize with some of the possibilities, like, for example, the autofocus. But I mentioned that the FX6 is a full frame 10 megapixel, and that means that it's 4K when you record in full frame, and the FX9 is a 6K. And without going too much into the nerdiness that I can explain, it's using the 6K to create a better image quality, but it's recording 4K files. So if you're recording full frame on the FX9, then you'll have what we call oversampling. So the camera is actually recording 6K, but saving a 4K file. So it's oversampling and giving you a higher image quality out of the box on the FX9. And the FX6 cannot do this because it's limited to the maximum 4K when you use the whole sensor. But that also means that some people who like the flexibility of a lens and being able to crop, meaning using a smaller part of the sensor compared to the original full size. If you do crop to, let's say, APS-C or Super 35 on the FX6, that means that you will suddenly no longer be in 4K. So you're now limited to only doing HD, which is fine if you're doing HD recording, but if you want to have some flexibility in post and so on, then with the FX6 you're locked to HD, and the FX9 you'll still be in 4K. So you can suddenly crop in and still be in 4K. Okay. And with version 3 you can actually crop in even further to what we call Super 16, and there we will still be in HD. So the FX9 does have some flexibility because the sensor has a higher resolution, but of course then we will compromise other things that camera can't do compared to a new camera in terms of having bigger pixels is a bigger sensitivity, obviously, and also we put in the newest computers in the FX6, so some of the autofocus is going to be better to working at the same time as it doing high speed, for example. So the FX6 can do high speed and autofocus at the same time, something that we've not been able to do with the FX9. I don't know if it's going to ever be possible, but it's something that a lot of people would like to do, and I understand why. So I would say that's maybe one of the main differences between these two cameras. Personally, I find some of the buttons between the FX9 and the FX6 to be a little bit important, because the FX9 is a bigger camera, so it fits more elegantly on your shoulder. It's designed to be on your shoulder out of the box, and it has some physical dials. So audio, we talked about the audio, for example, for 4 channels. The FX9 has 4 individual buttons to control those 4 audio channels, and the FX6 actually only has 2 audio buttons on the physical camera body. So even though it does record 4 channels, we're back to how the FS7 used to work, meaning that you have 4 channels of audio, but you can only control 2 of them on the physical body. And the FX9 has the benefit of having more dials and more buttons. And the same goes with the headphone audio and such. So I would say it's not. I understand why you can be a little bit confused about the differences, but when you start to use it and use it every day, and you're getting used to all the buttons and the flexibilities, some people will definitely find the FX9 a better camera than the FX6. But again, you get what you pay for. And then there's a frustration about, well, new technology does give you some nuggets that you don't get.
I think Ronny got
more
questions.
We have a customer who has been working with the A7S III, with the Ninja, Atomos Ninja, and he's asking if we go down to the camera compared to the FX6, which has the built-in ND filters. Why should you go for an FX6 instead of the A7S III with the Atomos Ninja?
Well, that's a good question, because the Alpha 7S that's a brilliant camera. I mean, even when we introduced a new codecs, so you could record 10 bits, as I talked about before, which was the benefit as well. So 10-bit recording internal is brilliant. The autofocus as well, and the high speed. So it is a really good camera. But I mean, we talked about the audio. I don't know if audio is important for the person who's asking the question, but if you want to have the manual control of the audio, and having 4 channels of audio and having the full control of that as well, then you need to start looking at adapters like the XLR adapter. So you put that on top, and then you suddenly have a camera and an adapter on top, and it's just not as elegant as having a full body that's made it out of the box. I think there was mention about the ND filter. The Alpha 7S does not have an electronic variable ND filter, but the FX6 does. So you can suddenly be very fluid and dynamic with your exposure. You can get away with moving between scenes where you have a big exposure change, but you can simply get the automated ND filter to control the exposure for you. That means that's a major benefit for anybody who's using a camera on a gimbal. And obviously you want to use the Alpha 7S on a gimbal, but you can get away with using the FX6 on a gimbal, and then you have much better control of the exposure without compromising your ISO or your iris or your shutter speed, which you normally would change if you wanted to change your exposure. Yes. But you don't need to do that with the FX6, but you do need to do it with the Alpha 7, and I think that's a major change. Again, the Alpha 7 is a brilliant camera, but it just doesn't have as many physical buttons as the FX6. So once you used to have that camera in your hands and you're producing every day for many weeks, that suddenly getting used to, well, here's my dedicated buttons for all of that, different settings that you want to change when you're following somebody and doing a documentary. Well, you can, with more buttons, and you have more flexibility, especially when you know your camera really well. And I would say that's the major difference between the Alpha 7S and the FX6. And there is not, once you start adding accessories, there's not that big of a price difference.
No. Okay. There's one more question.
Another question.
What about Super 35 in 4K? A future firmware, maybe?
So Super 35, also known as APS-C, is when you're actually using a smaller part of the sensor, and the sensor itself is limited to, when you're using a full frame, it is a 4K sensor. So once you start zooming into the central part of the sensor, you're eliminating pixels. So you would never be able to actually get more pixels if you crop. So by cropping, you are removing the pixels or not using the pixels that are there. So you would never be able to, with a firmware update, to change the hardware of the camera. It's a limitation in the hardware of the FX6 and the Alpha 7S that you simply can't go to Super 35 and stay in 4K. If you want that kind of workflow, you need to look at the FX9. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Let's move on to the presentation. And thank you for all the questions. Please keep them coming, because it's good to have some dynamic between. Morden's asking no questions at all. So, no, it's we have the face detection. So not only do we have autofocus where it uses contrast to define the subject, where should it pull the sharpness. It has a computer that uses artificial intelligence to analyze the image and say, this is a human face, and I will prioritize a human face over contrast. So, for example, we have a white background. Let's say the background changes and becoming more bright. With a contrast-based autofocus, it will then pull the focus to the background because it suddenly changes and becomes brighter. But the computer, the algorithm, the AI goes in and says, no, you shouldn't do that. You should stay on the face because the face is more important than the contrast. And that's where suddenly these cameras become smart. And we all know that when you have big what do you call them, big sensors, you have full frame lenses on them, you can really have a narrow, shallow depth of field. And pulling sharpness can be very difficult. And it's very unforgiving if you're doing it for video. It's different when you're doing it for stills. You can keep taking stills and stills and stills. There's the one that's sharp. But when you're doing that for video, you don't have the same opportunity.
No. That's a question more here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question like the question about the Super 35. It says, what about the clear image zoom?
Yes. Okay. So the clear image zoom is a technology where you can go beyond the limitations of the lens. So let's say you have a 24 to 100 millimeter lens, and you want to go further, you want to zoom in further than the 100 millimeters, but the lens will not enable you to do so. If you have a project, if you set up the camera to record HD, but the camera is using the full frame sensor, well then we can use clear image zoom, so we can continue to zoom even though the lens cannot go any further. Then we are actually zooming in digitally, but we're doing it live, so it's in the recordings or it's in the output if you're doing a live event. And you can simply benefit from having a pixel or enough pixels to still zoom in and still stay in HD. Obviously you can't do it in 4K if you're recording 4K because there is not enough pixels to eliminate. But if you're in an HD project, you can use the clear image zoom to digitally zoom in further. Okay. But I would say if you have a lens that can optically zoom in further, then I'd do the optical part first, and then I'll use the digital later. Yeah. If I was the one using it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. High-speed recording. So we actually are able to do 120 frames per second in 4K or in ultra-high definition internally in this camera. And that we can do at the same time as we're doing autofocus and other auto functionalities within this camera. And it's brilliant to see what this camera can do. Again, with the new computer, we benefit from that. Yeah. And if we go to an HD recording instead of 4K recording, we could go up to 240 frames per second. So again, amazing built-in capabilities. Yeah. This is a little bit of a nerdy slide, but it just shows you what can the camera do when set to different resolutions and different crop modes. So if you want to have the maximum frame rate within this camera, you need to stay in the full frame, but you're recording HD, and then you could go up to 240 frames per second. We already talked about the ND filter. So this is an electronic ND filter, so you have the control of your exposure. And it's simply built into the body. It's built in. It's not a filter in front of the... No, so we have a clear filter. When you don't have any filters, it's just a clear filter, so we still have an optics. And then when you activate the ND filter, it switches. And then you have simply... it's similar to how an LCD screen is designed. It's a clear filter where you put an electronic pulse through it. And when you add voltage to that LCD screen in front of the sensor, you will dim the amount of light that goes through that screen. And you can then turn up and down for that voltage. And then you got a way to control your the exposure. It's a quite smart way to do it, because normally you would use maybe polarized filters that go together and then you can control it, but then every single frame would be polarized, and maybe that's not the look that you want some shininess to it. Maybe it's really good. If you haven't tried a camera with electronic variable ND, you should have a go at it, because it works really well. Okay. And you also find that in the FX9? Yeah, so the FX9 and the FS5, the FS7 Mark II got it as well, because we didn't have it in the first FS7, and we suddenly introduced it in the FS5, and everybody was saying, this is brilliant, but why don't we have it in this camera? Okay. So we again, based on feedback, we had to make a camera that had it. And and the FX9 was the first camera that was full frame, that had a full frame electronic ND filter. The Venice camera does not have an electronic ND filter. It has optical ND filters. It has two turrets that move around, and you got 8 steps, but they can't be used variable as they can with the FX9. So it's got different hardware, so you have different capabilities with the different cameras. Okay. Yeah. Looking at the comparison between the FS5 and the FX6, if you look at the picture, you'll notice that there is actually a difference between the cameras. Not only size-wise, the FX6 is a little bit smaller, but it is heavier, which is a little bit strange, because if you look at the FS5 has an electronic viewfinder, and you might notice the FX6 has no electronic viewfinder. This is different, but although it does have much more hardware, which is why it's heavier, but it's still less than 900 grams, which is ideal for putting this camera into a drone or a gimbal or something like that. So it's still benefits for it. Design-wise, as I said, it's similar to what was great about the FS5. the side grip, the top handle, and the movable, flexible LCD. We changed the LCD, so the LCD is now up to HD resolution. So you have a better idea of what kind of content you're producing. You can see what you should expect in post. Ideal for when you want to pull manual focus, if you don't want to use the automatic. And the LCD can be moved around to the different positions. It's got so many positions you can put accessories on it. And so it's a great camera to be mobile. And if you want to use the camera in a different way, then you can make the screen position as it fits you. So it's a great way to work.
Will you later talk about what's in the box when you got the camera? Or can you...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can definitely go through this.
Yes, good.
The screen itself is a touch screen, so similar to the FX9. When that got version 2 update, it became a touch screen, or we enabled the touch functionality. The FX6 out of the box will have the touch screen possibility. So this, if you want to change something on the fly, instead of using the physical buttons, you can simply just touch with your foes.
Okay.
Thank you. So it's great for that kind of environment.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly go to the other side of the camera. So again, a feature that the FS5 was missing, and a lot of people were requesting, was the time code. So we now have the time code that either can be the input or the output of the camera. So it can work as a synchronized between two cameras and multiple cameras. You can actually have them all in synchronized with time code. So it's brilliant for anybody using these cameras in a multi-camera environment.
Yeah.
SDI upgraded now to 12G. This means that you can have a 4K 60p signal with one single cable. And this is also the same plug that you would use if you use it for RAW applications. So if you want to enable RAW workflow with this camera, it will be the SDI. It converts it from a video signal to a data signal. So you suddenly have the possibility to use the same plug for RAW data. HDMI is now 10-bit. So if you do have somebody mentioned an Atomos recorder before, well, if you have the HDMI version, you can record 10-bit out of the camera through the HDMI. So you can use the lower quality recorders, or the lower, not quality, but the lower cost of the Atomos recorders, for example, that are only HDMI based. So if you really want to record ProRes or something, then you can use that box and get it 10-bit out of the camera.
Okay. I think
another question.
No.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'll go through this. So there's also built-in Wi-Fi, so I'll talk about that as well. It's brilliant for these kind of workflows. So 4 channels of audio. So one question that I did see that somebody was asking on Facebook, I'll just read it up loud. So why did you choose to locate both XLRs and the MISU on the top handle? Doesn't it make it excessively difficult for audio? And well, that might be so. I mean, the FS5 had a single XLR on the actual body. The feedback was some people loved it because you could remove everything and you still had one XLR plug. That was brilliant. But for a lot of people who are using multiple receivers, one receiver receiving multiple channels, you'd have to pinpoint the XLRs in 2 different directions. And the feedback was a lot of people did not find that very elegant. Christmas trees were mentioned, how this wasn't really elegant for them. So going back to what we previously did before the FS5 was actually having 2 XLRs on the handle. Well, I mean, again, we would like to receive the feedback when people start using it, because if we did something wrong, well, we can then learn from it and then try to do it better next time. So it would be interesting what the feedback is now that we put 2 XLRs back on the handle again. Yeah. And yes, by having the MISU very close, I mean, either you have all of your audio channels very close to each other. That can be a good thing, that it can also be an annoying thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a question more?
Yeah, will ProRes RAW work with the Ninja 5 with the SDI expander?
That's a good question. I'm not, to be honest, I don't quite know which kind of RAW capabilities there will be available between the FX6 and the Atomos products. I know that the FX6 has a possibility of sending 16 bits of raw signal, which recorders and which end codec will be able to record that in the end. I'm not too sure of that because it's very new to us how this has become possible. So unfortunately, I can't answer that completely now. You have to forgive me to not knowing all of the questions, all of the answers to the questions.
Good.
If we go back to the design, I think when we got interrupted, I was just talking about time code. So the camera itself now has a physical time code plug, which is something that we've been missing with the FS5. So synchronizing between multiple cameras can now be done much easier as it has a dedicated timecode plug. As I talked about the RAW, so it has 16-bit RAW with the SDI. So if you enable RAW signal, the SDI will turn into a data signal. Otherwise, it can become a video signal. So you have either 12G, 6G, 3G, and 1.5G. 12G is, of course, 4K resolution up to 60 frames per second, and that's with one single cable.
Okay.
You talked about the Atomos products. Some of the Atomos products are HDMI based, and they have a lower cost than the SDI based. So if you want to use an HDMI to record ProRes, not ProRes RAW, but ProRes out of the box, the video codec, the video version, you can do that with the HDMI because the HDMI has been upgraded to 10-bit instead. And we also have built-in Wi-Fi as well. So there's a lot of things we can do with this camera.
Yep.
4 channels of audio, we mentioned that already. It's very similar to how you used to do it with the FS7. So if you want to have 4 dedicated XLR plugs, you need to use an XLR adapter that goes into the MI shoe on top, and then you can have the benefit of all 4 channels being XLR based. And of course, we also have the actual dedicated Sony receivers, and these can be slided on top of the MI shoe and go directly into the camera. This means that it uses the same battery as the camera. You do not need any cables because the audio signal goes through the adapter into the camera.
Okay, great.
Very, very elegant. And by using that, you still have the 2 XLR plugs. So if you have anything that's XLR based, you can still use that as well. This nerdy slide, I kept it in, even though it should not be too nerdy with this stream, but I wanted to explain what's missing compared to what we normally see on professional video cameras from Sony. Broadcasters, for example, have been using the codec called XD Cam or MPEG HD 422. That's a very typical codec that's been ongoing since 2003, and this codec is not available in this camera. So for the first time, we're not using this codec in some of the high-end professional cameras. But we are also, we didn't have this in the Alpha 7S. And remember that the development team is using the Alpha 7S, has been using that as a stepping stone also between how to design this camera. So we do see that some things are not as they used to. If you want that codec, you need to look at some of the other models that we have. For example, the FX9, if that is a very important codec, if that will save you a lot of time in post and a lot of money on your servers, then maybe the extra cost of the FX9 might be suitable for that workflow, for that application.
Okay.
Another thing that's missing is the interlaced recording. This camera is a 100% progressive camera. So you cannot record interlaced with this camera. Another thing that is a little bit different from what we're used to. The Alpha 7S, as well, I believe, cannot do interlaced either, but this is a full progressive camera. And that being said, some broadcasters or somebody who generates news, they use streaming backpacks and so on to send the signal live through the cellular network with a backpack, and that needs to be interlaced. For many TV stations. You get high image quality for low bandwidth. And they want to keep that workflow, and that workflow today is mainly interlaced. If you want that workflow, you can go to the FX6 menu and you can determine the output of the SDI to be interlaced. So you might be recording progressive, but you can output interlaced. So you can still get an interlaced signal out of the camera. If you want to use it for live, that's the way to do it, but you can't record it.
Okay. There's a question from...
Oh yeah, sorry. There's a question from the audience.
Yes. Yeah, it's regarding the memory type cards. Does if you want to record DCI 4K 25K, no, 4K 25p?
Yes.
Do you need to use CF Express, or can you shoot on SD cards?
So it all depends on the SD card. So this slide here demonstrates that we can do both the CF Express and the SD cards, similar to the design of the Alpha 7S. Very, very intuitive. And yes, you can use it for 4K 25p. It's when you start going into 4K high speed, you will find some of the limitations. I mean, we got different speeds of cards like the V60 and the V90. The V90 has the highest speed, and therefore you can do the maximum frame rate, but you can't do all the frame rates available inside the camera with that card. If you want to be able to do everything with a single card, then you need to go to the CF Express, and you can do everything with that card. But if you know that you don't want to do high speed necessarily, you can use the SD cards to not only do HD but also do 4K recordings, as long as you don't go, I believe it's over 60 frames per second. If you download the manual, you will be able to see exactly a chart of which cards you can use in different resolutions and different frame rates. Yeah. But the rule of thumb is the CF Express Type A will be able to use any single flavor that the camera can produce. Yeah. Okay.
But it is a slightly more expensive card.
It is.
Than the SD.
You get what you pay for.
More than slightly. Yes.
Well, it's also it is a more reliable media. I don't know how many people have been investing in an SD card and that SD card does not work after a few months. It's not the same quality control that gets done by those type of cards compared to a more professional media. So that's the thing.
Then the time is running.
Time is running.
I know you have one more new product we should cover before we
close that's true. Yeah, that's true. I mean,
and maybe you have some more important additional slides we should cover before. But
yeah, what should you do? I mean, I don't have any. I don't have the lens with me, but there is a new lens that we actually announced last year, which at IBC we could show it as a dummy. This is a lens 2B, but then unfortunately there was some difficulties with producing it, and then Corona hit. Yes. So we got massive delays, but now it's here. It's finally here, and it's the 16 to 35 millimeter lens, and this is a T3.1, so the T-stop is fluid all the way through the zoom. So elegant.
So it's a typical cinema.
Yes. And then we got this add-on motor on the side, so the camera can actually control all of the three wheels that you would normally assign manually. You can decide should they be controllable manually or should they be controllable on through the camera, either remotely or automatically. So it's a brilliant lens for high quality cinematic workflow, and it's the first lens of a series that is to come. So we plan to launch a total of 3 lenses in total, but I don't know the exact focal lengths yet of the next lenses, but the first one is a 16 to 35, so we'll be able to cover that full frame wide angle look that this camera can do.
Okay. Yeah. And for the viewers, I can say check out our website. We have the new lens in the web shop where you can see more details.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Should we quickly go through the last bits? I mean, I know everybody's. It's getting late, and everybody wants to go back to what they used to do at home. Yeah. So network connectivity, very quickly. We got lots of things built in. So we got the really high-speed Wi-Fi. This gives us the connectivity to connect to the internet and being able to send files to FTP protocols or to clouds. So we can send our files as we produce them very quickly to the internet. So you can have an editor on standby and starting to edit some of the material that you've produced the same day. It's very handy in these Corona times where you can't physically go back to some cards, but you need to start editing. You can do it with the original clips, or you can record some MP4 wrappers as well.
Okay.
That's very handy. Image stabilization in post can be done because we have gyroscopics. this gyroscopic information is recorded into the file, so you can stabilize your clips very quickly in post afterwards if you want to do that.
Great.
We have a dedicated button on the side of the camera that is a clip flag. So it's a tiny flag on the side of the camera, and this is metadata. So when you're recording a clip and you say this is a good clip, I'm going to use that for my edit, you can press that clip flag, and then you would add a metadata tag on that clip. So if you do that when recording or doing playback, that will be saved as metadata.
And you can see it on the timeline.
Yes. Well, actually, when you're importing your clips, let's say you have one card with 100 clips, then you can filter them to only show the ones with metadata tags. So if you have 10 clips that you added the metadata tag, you can quickly find those and then use them for edits. The gyroscopic information can also see when you're tilting the camera for social media productions. So that means that your editing will automatically switch. If you signed it to it, then you'll turn the view so it fits your social media platform as well.
Oh, great.
Very neat.
Ronnie has got one more, maybe the final question.
With this FX6, can you transmit the files directly to an FTP?
Yes, yes, you can do that. You can either do it by manually choosing which files that you want to send. So you can go through the thumbnails, or you can use this app to target which clips you want to send. But you can also, because I mentioned the MP4 wrappers, you can assign the camera to automatically send those. So if you're a photographer who does not want to have too many things to do, you can set the camera to automatically send every single clip that you recorded. Every time you press stop recording, it will add it to the job list, and it will then send it to the FTP. Great. So it's great for anybody working in two places. So you have one on location and one in your editing. It's very good for efficient workflows. The Content Browser Mobile, the CBM application, is a free of charge app that works for iPhones and for Android devices. And this means that you can connect to the camera and you can see a live video image as long as you're on the same network. So you can put your phone on a hotspot, so it has a Wi-Fi around your phone, and then your camera can connect to that hotspot. And then you can simply be on the same network and you can see the video image on your phone. So if you have a smartphone in your pocket, that can be a wireless monitor. And let's say that you have two cameras, you can go over to one of the cameras and you can use your phone to control the other. So it's a quite elegant way to be inflexible, even though you've got lots of cameras. Yes.
Okay.
We talked about accessories, and we still follow the same protocol. So we have the possibility to use the same accessories that work with the previous ones. Should they be audio related, MI related, remote control related, these will still work. The same batteries as well. We talked about some of the things that would include. Of course, when you have a new camera, you can either buy the camera standalone without any lenses, or you can buy the kit where you get a single lens with it. It's an 18 to 105, I believe, and that lens is a very good out-of-the-box standard lens, f-stop full all the way through, and you can use that for lots of flexible productions. You'll get a small battery, 35 milliwatts, and you'll get a charger and a power supply, and then you'll be ready for ideal shooting. But you can, of course, you can supply lots of accessories if you want to run a whole day. But I believe that the 35mm gives you about 1.5. So the 35 milliwatt battery gives you an hour and a half recording time. If you go for the largest battery, the 100 milliwatts, you'll have 5 hours of recording time. Yeah, great. So that's quite effective.
Yes.
Heating. Heating wise, we only have, well, we try to make our cameras so they don't overheat, and that therefore we need some really effective fans, and we have a dedicated solution where everything is sealed, and you have a dedicated fan solution as well. We still make the magnesium alloy, same type. It feels like it's a type of plasticky, but it is actually an alloy, so it's a metal device and it's very, very robust. And I haven't seen a camera that's broken yet. It's quite strong.
Impressive.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was I tried to rush through the last part very quickly. And for anything regarding prices and everything, you of course can supply those kind of answers on your homepage, can you not?
Yes, absolutely. We already have on our website the new FX6 camera, and you can check out the price here. Regarding when we can start to deliver the first cameras, we expect the first one to be in mid-December. But it's a very good idea to make a pre-order on the camera if you want to join the line of people waiting for this new exciting product. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Detailed introduction.
Thank you for the questions.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, and thank you for watching us, people. I think we will wrap up this broadcast by maybe watching your video one more time.
Yeah, let's do that.
About the product.
Yeah, I'll do.
Okay.
I'll run the last video, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you out there.